Pokémon Black and White are the single most divisive games in the Pokémon series. Some people think these are the best games that Pokémon has ever released, and others believe this was the beginning of the end and led to Pokémon being what it is today. But who's right? Just like the common cold, about 3 times a year I catch the bug to catch them all. It's no wonder why Pokémon is the #1 selling media franchise in the world. I'm not surprised. For the last 25 years, it has been an institution in families across the world. Go up to anybody and show them this picture. I guarantee they can tell you who it is.
It's George Bush!
More recently, a lot of fans have felt that Pokémon has lost its way, with the modern games feeling like they've lost a lot of their soul. Some people blame it on the lack of challenge in the games and call for them to make the games as difficult as possible. Others will blame the leap to modern hardware, which shows how Pokémon is really dated as far as mechanics and engines. But ultimately, most people can agree that the best time to be a Pokémon fan was around the era of the DS. Pokémon Black and White released on September 18th, 2010 in Japan, March 6th, 2011 in North America, March 4th, 2011 in Europe, and March 10th, 2011 in Australia. Prior to this game releasing, they announced that this game was going to have only new Pokémon included in the base game. This was done to give these games the original feeling that was lost in the modern games. They wanted them to feel like Pokémon Red and Blue did on the Game Boy Color. And it went over really well. Okay, maybe it didn't. This is where all of the controversy began. Some people were interested in trying out all the new Pokémon that were added to the games and looked forward to having a fresh start. But some people thought that it was a really dumb idea to remove all of the fan favorite Pokémon from the game just to make people start over with Pokémon that they don't know and might not like. Either way you feel about it, you're not alone. This is the single most divisive change that Pokémon has ever made, barring the Dexit travesty. With that being said, the game starts off like every other Pokémon game. You live in a small town and you pick your starter Pokémon and go on your journey. In Black and White, you get to choose between Snivy, Tepig, and Oshawott. Looking back, these starters were pretty good designs. I wouldn't say they're the best in the series, but they do have a lot of personality. The main controversy at the time and to this day was that Tepig evolves into Emboar, which is the 3rd firefighting starter in a row. Talk about beating a dead horse. Having to follow up in the footsteps of Blaziken and Infernape was not setting this Pokemon up for success. But ultimately, you gotta pick Snivy. I mean, look at him, he just looks so sassy. After you pick your starter, you meet your rivals, Charon and Bianca, and you have a giant Pokemon battle inside of the bedroom of your house. I can only imagine you're going on this Pokemon journey to flee from destroying the entire upstairs of your parents' house. Then you begin your journey exploring all that Unova has to offer. You can tell from the moment you start this game that it's playing on new hardware, because the graphics got overhauled completely, even from Generation 4. And in my opinion, this is the best that the series has and will ever look. I'm someone who prefers the sprites over 3D models. I don't know if that makes me insane or not, but I really like it. All of the sprites in this game had so much personality, and the Unova region itself was beautiful to explore. The early game is your standard Pokemon experience. You catch Pokemon, build your team, fight gyms. But in this game, you're introduced to the villain organization really early on into the story. The villain group in this game is called Team Plasma, and as the story progresses, you learn more and more about them. And one of the things that is beloved most about this game is how great of an organization Team Plasma is. Team Plasma's goal is to liberate Pokemon from human control, and they're led by N, who's a trainer who looks to Pokemon as equals and not as tools to be used for humanity's needs. N was groomed as a child to be the person who liberates Pokemon from humanity. Come to find out, he really was groomed by a guy named Getsis. N truly believed what he was doing was for the greater good of all Pokemon and humanity, but Getsis wanted to be the only person who's allowed to have Pokemon and take over the whole Unova region. That's a simplification of what happens, but this Pokemon game is the perfect example of why these stories are so beloved. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think every Pokemon game needs to be Citizen Kane. Team Rocket is great because they just steal Pokemon, but being able to tell a gripping story while making a game is something that Pokemon got really good at in this era. Another thing that's loved about this game is the gyms. Even as early as the first gym, it's a feeling of uniqueness that is just missing in other games. Depending on what starter you pick, the first gym is going to have one of 3 different leaders, part of a band of brothers who specialize in different Pokemon types. This gym is going to directly counter whatever you pick as a starter, and that's a really interesting idea. Especially because in the modern games, now your rival is even picking Pokemon that is weak to what you pick. Having a forced challenge in the early game was something that was really nice. All of the gyms in this game were really well designed, and I really liked Clay's gym because I love elevators. As I mentioned earlier, this game has a huge amount of new Pokemon because you can only use Pokemon that were new to the Unova region in this game. But even with all the new Pokemon, the early routes in this game just feel really lackluster, and most of the Pokemon that you can get early in the game are boring. I hate Unpheasant with every fiber of my being. Look at it, it's a disgrace. I want to burn this, I want to burn it with fire. Luckily that does ease up as the game progresses, but there are still a lot of Pokemon in this game that I didn't like design-wise. Some people believe that Pokemon designs have gotten worse as the years have gone on, and others think that it's remained at a pretty constant level. And this game's the perfect example. Some people think that this game has the best Pokemon designs in the series, and others think that they are just a big swing and a miss. But regardless of the designs, not having a good selection of early Pokemon really turned a lot of people off of this game. And couple that with a slow early game, and a lot of people put this game down before they got to the end. But sticking through it and playing this game, you get an experience that is truly special. This was the first game in the series to add a lot of quality of life improvements that make this game so much more approachable for new and old fans. They got a little carried away with this in recent years, but I think they have a perfect level of balance in Black and White. This was the first game to have reusable TMs, which is something that I believe was a great mechanic added to this game. It never made sense to me that using a CD once would get rid of the ability to use it again. Like, are they just using it and then snapping it to prevent piracy issues? Having reusable TMs made sense and made it so you don't have to have a full commitment of giving a Pokemon a move, and made it so if you want to teach two Pokemon the same move, you can do that. Another thing they added was seasonal changes, which are a really cool mechanic in this game. Having certain Pokemon that'll have different forms depending on the time of year you catch them in is awesome to see. It reminded me of the day and night cycle in Generation 2 that didn't get added to Gen 3 for some reason. Pokemon like Sawsbuck had 4 different forms depending on what time of year it was, and I thought that was a really cool idea. This gave me a reason to want to pick this game up every so often and try it out to see what different areas or Pokemon were available. The last notable thing they added was rotation battles, and I'll be honest, I didn't have much fun with these. I understand why these fell flat compared to double battles, because this gimmick was just doing a little too much. Having to switch between 3 Pokemon on the field at once added an intricate layer of strategy, but ultimately it made me feel like I was wasting my time in these battles. But Black and White wasn't afraid to try new things, and that's why some people think it's so great and others think it's terrible. As the game progresses, I got more invested in the story and the region, and if you can get through the lackluster early game, Black and White's mid to late game is something that's really fun and engaging, and I had a hard time putting it down once I picked it up. Locations like Nimbasa, Driftfield, and Chargestone Cave all looked really cool and had engaging designs. All the gyms were fun, and the last gym was especially interesting because I played both Black and White and it had different gym leaders. Even though it had the same team, it was something that was a neat detail. Seeing Iris in the game made me have flashbacks to watching Pokemon on Saturday mornings. And once you get through all the gyms, the Elite Four was really cool too. The coolest thing about the Elite Four is that you can beat them in whatever order you want. It doesn't matter. If I know one of the teams is gonna bother me, I'd rather fight them first and not have to worry about it every time. But once you beat the Elite Four, that was kind of it. This game lacked any and all post-game, and it was really sad to see. Sure, there's new sections of the map you can explore, but these areas didn't have that much in them, and there was such a power creep after the Elite Four that it didn't feel fun to play. I beat the Elite Four and then had to grind in Victory Road to stand a chance against these people. These areas were big but had nothing to do in them. It just seemed like so much wasted space. But I can look past the lack of post-game content with how great all of the events in this game were. Anytime there was a special event, I remember grabbing my DS and scurrying over to GameStop and getting whatever Pokemon or pass that allowed me to get the Pokemon and having a great time in these events. Buying the game gave me access to Victini, which was a great event. I remember it so fondly to this day. Black and White did some incredible things to Pokemon's formula and really took some big risks that to this day have left fans divided over the quality. But I believe these games are perfectly rated. I can understand people who think that they are the best in the series, and I can understand people who are not a big fan. I really love a lot about these games, but I understand they were such a big switch up that people have their reservations. All that I can say is that if you haven't played Black and White yet, or haven't played it in years, give it a go. Just get through the slow early game and you'll have an incredible time and experience one of the best stories Pokemon has to offer. If you made it this far in the video, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. I hope that you and your family have an incredible day, and I hope that if you like anything here, you'll consider subscribing. Thank you.